A sleek black Maybach rolled to a silent stop at the edge of the Savannah waterfront. Billionaire Serena Ashford stepped out, walking toward the quiet mechanic sitting alone on the wooden dock. His clothes were stained with grease, a heavy wrench resting against his worn boot. She stood over him, offering pity before asking a simple question. "Can I sit with you?" Marcus Cole just nodded without looking up. She sat down beside him, watching the river. She had no idea this grease-covered stranger had quietly wired $22 million into her struggling charity over the last 5 years. But tonight her entire world was about to unravel. The powerful billionaire sitting next to a dirty boat mechanic on a public dock had absolutely no clue that this quiet man was the only thing keeping her empire from collapsing. Have you and I ever sat next to a stranger, completely blind to how they already changed our lives? Go back 3 weeks, long before the dock, the question, or any of it. Marcus Cole lived a quiet life that nobody in Savannah ever noticed. He woke at 5:15 in a small clapboard house near the Wilmington River. Left a quick note for his young daughter, then drove to Thunderbolt Marina. He ran a simple one-man boat repair shop out of a rented slip. His hands were skilled, his rates always fair. Local neighbors assumed he was just a lonely mechanic who drifted south from somewhere up north, and Marcus never cared to correct them. But here is what you and I know. Marcus had spent 11 years ruling Wall Street as a brilliant fund manager. By 32, he managed portfolios worth over $4 billion for a midtown Manhattan firm. His beloved wife Catherine worked as a pediatrician at New York Presbyterian. She grew up right in Savannah, the proud daughter of a local shrimper. She deeply understood the power of wealth when placed in the right hands. A small brass compass sat on her desk, a treasured gift from her father. She always said that endless money without any clear direction was just noise. Then, Catherine tragically died in a highway accident when their daughter was only 3 years old. Marcus buried her in Savannah, right behind the historic church where her parents once wed. Afterward, he liquidated every share and closed out all his accounts. He walked away from his powerful career, moving silently into that house on the Wilmington River. He left without telling a single soul. Within 6 months of moving, Marcus quietly created an anonymous charity called the Compass Fund, named in honor of Catherine's brass compass. Using legal shields, the trust distributed massive grants to 14 different charities across the country, each one dedicated to helping vulnerable children and women. The biggest recipient of all was the Ashford Harbor Foundation, a local Savannah nonprofit running safe shelters for orphans and survivors of domestic abuse. Marcus backed Ashford because its mission perfectly matched the dream Catherine spoke about during the very last year of her life. She used to say every child deserves a roof that does not leak, and he would make sure of it. That afternoon, Marcus picked up his daughter from school at 3 o'clock sharp. At 8 years old, she was quiet, with her mother's dark hair and a love for drawing. She hopped into his truck, clutching a colorful sheet of construction paper. "I drew your boat, Dad," she said, showing him a crayon drawing of a blue boat on green water. Marcus studied her drawing. "You got the waterline right," he said. Nora beamed. Sitting on the dock with their ice cream, they watched a pelican dive, content in their quiet world. Marcus softly kissed her forehead. "Everything I do is for you," he whispered quietly. "You know that, right?" Nora nodded, focusing back on her ice cream. Once Nora slept, Marcus sat in his dark office, opening his laptop to resume his secret work. He accessed the quarterly financial records for the Ashford Harbor Foundation, his hidden domain. These reports came through intermediaries, a strict condition for his massive, life-changing funding. Something had been quietly troubling him for months. 3 construction projects funded by his massive Compass Fund. Shelters meant to save rural Georgia children had been listed as in progress for years. Yet he found no progress photos, no contractor invoices, and 0 permit filings. The numbers were a lie. He noted this in his private file and closed the laptop. He didn't have enough evidence yet, but his gut recognized this scam from his high-stakes Wall Street years. Someone was pocketing the money he had donated to change these children's lives. Across Savannah, a glass office sat high atop a restored River Street warehouse, worlds away from his dock. There, Serena Ashford was planning the gala she believed would define her legacy. Her Ashford Harbor Foundation occupied the building's entire grand fourth floor, a bright, sprawling space packed with case files and massive donation records. Alongside photos of the vulnerable children she believed her foundation was saving. Serena had started the organization 8 years ago when she was 26. She had nothing but a business degree from Georgia State and a childhood spent in the foster system. Orphaned at 4, she was bounced between 7 different foster homes by age 12. At 18, she aged out with nothing but a duffel bag and $1,100. She built her empire from nothing, earning the media's nickname, the Iron Philanthropist. She didn't exactly love the title, but she never did anything to deny it. Her foundation's grand annual fundraiser, the Harbor Gala, was just 3 weeks away. This single night brought in her primary operating revenue each year. And this year, Serena needed to raise $20 million just to keep all 6 shelters operating through the next year. The logistics were absolutely massive. Venues, high-end catering, and intense media coordination. Serena micromanaged it all, aided only by a skeleton staff and the single person she trusted above anyone else. Grant Mercer had served as her trusted chief financial officer for 6 years. He was 45, polished, and unfailingly calm under pressure. Serena treated him like her own brother. He controlled every dollar, and she trusted him so blindly she never questioned his numbers. That morning, Serena and her team arrived at the Thunderbolt Marina waterfront to inspect the outdoor venue booked for the gala, a renovated dock pavilion overlooking the scenic Wilmington River. Upon arrival, she saw Marcus kneeling beside a sailboat, sanding fiberglass like a common laborer. Grant stepped out, glanced at the seemingly broken mechanic, and waved his hand dismissively. "Clear your trash, this area is reserved," Grant barked. Marcus remained silent. He quietly gathered his tools, hiding his true power, and moved down the dock. Serena barely glanced at the broken man as she walked right past him. What Serena didn't realize. Here is what actually happened later that afternoon, behind the closed doors of a rented Savannah office. Grant Mercer sat across the table from 2 men in expensive suits. These were representatives of an investment group he had secretly partnered with for 3 years. Their arrangement was incredibly simple. Grant invented fake construction projects under the charity foundation's nose. He funneled Compass Fund money into his own shell companies, splitting the take with his partners. Over 36 months, he had siphoned $12 million from the Ashford Harbor Foundation. He knew a massive anonymous donor kept them afloat, but he had no clue who was actually pulling the strings of the Compass Fund. With the cash flowing and the donor remaining in the shadows, Grant felt totally secure. But that safety shattered when Serena received a secure email from the Compass Fund's legal team. The email was brief. It demanded a complete financial audit of the foundation right before the upcoming gala. Serena read it twice, shrugged, and sent it to Grant. She easily agreed, believing she was clean. But when Grant read those same words at his desk, his entire world started to slip away. Just 10 days before the gala, Serena hosted an exclusive pre-gala party at the riverfront's luxury Bohemian Hotel. The high society guest list was packed with wealthy donors, politicians, and the local press. It was a high-end cocktail and schmooze event meant to lock in final donations. Overlooking the river, the golden afternoon light made the entire elite crowd look incredibly important. Meanwhile, Marcus had arrived at the marina. He was there to finish repairing a boat docked just 2 slips down from the party. He wore a faded flannel, heavy work boots, and had black engine grease on his arms. He didn't even know their reception was happening until he walked past the terrace on his way back to his truck. Grant spotted him first. The CFO was chatting by the bar with several donors when he saw Marcus walking near the edge of the terrace. He clinked his glass down and raised his voice, making sure the entire crowd could hear. "Excuse me, who allowed you in here? This is a private party for people who actually contribute to society, not a rest stop for lazy laborers." A wealthy donor in a seersucker jacket laughed out loud. 2 elegant women by the railing exchanged quick glances and shook their heads. A local councilwoman turned away, seemingly embarrassed by the ugly scene unfolding before her. The chuckles that followed weren't incredibly loud, but they were devastatingly precise. It was the kind of laugh that put a working man in his place, showing he was nothing. Marcus stopped walking. He looked straight at Grant. His face didn't change at all, no anger, no shame, not even a flinch. He held that icy gaze for 3 long seconds, until Grant's arrogant smile began to falter. Long enough for the heavy air between them to completely shift. Then he simply turned and walked away in silence, not rushed and never bowing his head. He carried himself like a man who knew the people mocking him weren't even worth the breath it would take to put them in their place. Serena stood just 6 feet from the entire encounter. She watched Marcus leave with cold indifference, never dreaming this broken man was actually the savior changing lives behind the scenes. He wasn't her concern. He was nobody's concern, or so she thought. Serena turned back to her guests, blind to the truth, but one assistant noticed what she completely missed. Joanna Price was 28, a junior accountant who had joined the charity 4 months back. She stood near the terrace railing when Grant publicly humiliated Marcus. Yet something about the quiet way he took the blow unsettled her. She had seen people take public insults before. They usually stammered, turned red, or cowered with slumped shoulders. Marcus did none of that. His calm was not the surrender of a broken man. It was the quiet power of someone who simply did not need to fight. Once Marcus left, Joanna passed Grant's table to grab a leftover binder. Right next to it sat a manila folder half hidden by a napkin stamped in red. The label read Compass Fund Confidential. Joanna glanced around quickly. She pulled out her phone, photographing the cover before anyone noticed. 2 days later, the foundation's entire financial network completely crashed. The central server housing donor files and tracking grants. And Gala Logistics went offline instantly, and the internal tech team was completely helpless. Serena desperately needed those files for compliance, and without them, she was stuck. The critical audit requested by the anonymous donor was completely stalled. Under pressure, Serena drove down to the waterfront that afternoon for a final venue walkthrough. There sat Marcus, the seemingly broken dock worker, typing away on a laptop. Passing by, she peeked at his screen, spotting rows of complex financial data formulas and massive pivot tables. Hardly the kind of data a simple boat mechanic would use. She stopped. Speaking directly to him for once, she asked, "You're always out here. What exactly do you do?" Marcus did not look up. "Fix boats," he replied. Before she could push, a panicked Gala technician came rushing over to her. The stage rigging and sound system, and the massive lighting array installed for the gala had gone completely dead. The main board was frozen, and the emergency electricians they called could not make it until the weekend. Serena sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Just another delay. But then Marcus silently stood up without being asked. He walked over to the system control panel mounted on the dock, popped open the cover, scanning the complex wiring for 30 seconds. Then he reached inside, rewiring components with a rapid precision that instantly silenced the panicked technician. His fingers flew through the mess, acting with the absolute confidence of a man who masterminds complex networks. He saw way past basic fuses directly into the underlying logic. 4 minutes later, the entire system roared to life, lights, screens, everything. Marcus quietly shut the panel and wiped his grease-stained hands. Then he returned to his screen as if saving the day was no harder than tying his shoe. The technician stood paralyzed, while 2 nearby crew members stopped working just to watch. "Where on earth did you learn to do that?" the technician stammered. Marcus offered a brief glance. "I read a lot." Then he went back to his screen. The stunned technician slowly turned to look at Serena. Serena stared at Marcus. The crew exchanged looks. Not a single soul spoke for a long moment. She held back her thanks, just standing there, captivated by his swift fingers on the keyboard. He moved through complex database systems with the ease of a mastermind, not a struggling mechanic. Not engine grease. She assumed she was pitying a broken man, yet his posture defied his dirty flannel shirt. No arrogance there, just a man who had spent years changing lives without needing praise. She walked back to her luxury car, glancing back at him with lingering pity. Marcus didn't flinch. That evening she opened her laptop to investigate her new charity project. She Googled Marcus Cole Savannah, expecting a sob story, but found nothing. No LinkedIn, no social media, no news articles, and no business registrations. To the digital world, the man was invisible. In a fully connected world, hiding this well was a deliberate choice. This deliberate secrecy fascinated the billionaire far more than any dry financial audit Grant could show her. Back at her foundation, Grant summoned Joanna into his private corner office, shutting the door. He stood over her menacingly. "I understand you've been digging into the Compass Fund," he warned. His tone was steady, almost pleasant. "That fund is far above your pay grade. I highly suggest you stick to the work you were hired to do." Joanna nodded and left, fully receiving the threat. She knew men like Grant only issued warnings when they had serious secrets to protect. 5 days before the major charity gala, catastrophe struck. The billionaire arrived at her desk to find an email from the Compass Fund's legal representative. The brief message was absolutely chilling. Effective immediately. All payouts from the Compass Fund to the Ashford Harbor Foundation are frozen until an independent audit is complete. No cash will move until we review the results. Serena read the lines 3 painful times. She opened the foundation's master budget and felt all the blood drain from her face. That single anonymous fund supplied 60% of her foundation's entire annual income. Without that cash, her lavish gala was $8 million short of its goal. 6 shelters, 412 children, 209 employees. Every single life depended on millions that had suddenly stopped flowing. For the first time in her privileged career, the composed billionaire completely lost her composure. Slamming her palms flat against the massive conference table, she had to tell them the brutal, terrifying truth. "Our primary donor has frozen our funding. If we don't cover this deficit before gala night, we start closing shelters in 90 days. The conference room fell dead silent as a coordinator in the back covered her mouth. A senior case manager, with us since the very first year, just stared at the table, completely speechless. Grant leaned in closely. His expression was carefully calibrated to show deep concern without any panic. "This anonymous donor was always a huge liability," he said. "We have zero transparency, no direct relationship, and absolutely no leverage. Fortunately, I've already been negotiating with a massive firm called Meridian Partners. They are prepared to step in as our new primary donor as early as tonight. They support our mission and are ready to move quickly." His calm voice sounded reassuring. But Grant hid the truth. Meridian Partners was just a corrupt shell company he controlled. Routing the gala millions through his shell firm would let him pocket $5 million completely undetected. The desperate billionaire was weighing the dirty deal when she spotted the envelope. It sat on her desk completely unmarked and unsealed. Inside lay a single printed page listing 3 massive construction projects her charity funded. 3 Georgia locations that were supposed to be active shelters for kids. Beside each project was a plain text note: no permits filed anywhere. No contractors on record, 0 construction activity at the listed addresses. She took the pages to Grant. He barely blinked. "Those are Phase 1. He claimed they were just stalled by permitting delays with the county. "Someone is feeding you lies to ruin us before the gala. This is exactly why we need Meridian." Serena hesitated. Then she nodded. She desperately wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. 2 days later, Joanna Price was fired. The official excuse was a violation of internal data security protocols. The real reason? Grant traced the Compass Fund search right to her workstation. He signed the termination papers himself and had security escort her out before lunch. Her desk was cleared by afternoon, her email shut down within the hour. It was clean, efficient, and designed to warn anyone else who got too curious. Joanna tracked Marcus down at the marina that very evening. She had no real reason to find him except pure instinct. The same gut feeling that warned her when she saw him take Grant's insult without flinching. She sat on the wooden dock beside him and spoke carefully. "I don't know who you are," she said, "but something is deeply wrong inside the Ashford Harbor Foundation. And I think you already know that." Marcus studied her face for a long time. The river lapped against the pilings. A shrimp boat glided slowly through the channel behind them. Then he said, "Tell me everything." That night, Marcus broke a strict rule he had kept for 5 years. He had always worked through intermediaries, using lawyers, trustees, and encrypted channels. He never directly interfered in the daily affairs of the organizations he funded. But now there was no more time for distance. He called a forensic accounting firm in Atlanta, a small firm specializing in nonprofit fraud. He hired them for an absolute emergency. a 48-hour audit of the Ashford Harbor Foundation's entire financial history. The retainer was $400,000, paid from a personal account untouched for 3 years. While the auditing team worked, Marcus ran his own numbers. He spent 2 straight nights at his kitchen table after Nora went to sleep, tracing every single dollar the Compass Fund had sent to Ashford Harbor. After 3 quiet years, the complex work came back to him like muscle memory. The elite pattern recognition skills that once made him one of the absolute best on Wall Street now focused on a very different kind of ledger. What he uncovered was highly systematic and precise. Grant had set up 7 shell companies across Panama, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands. Using complex transfers disguised as vendor payments and fake contractor fees, he funneled $12.4 million out of the foundation into private accounts. There was a second phase already planned. Right after the gala, Grant planned to route $5 million through Meridian Partners, then vanish. Marcus copied all the damning data onto a flash drive for Joanna. "Get this to Serena," he told her. "Tell her it's from someone who cares about the foundation. Keep my name out of it." Joanna took the drive without asking a single question. Serena received it the next day. Serena turned the drive over in her hand, thinking she held all the power. Before she could open it, Grant stepped inside. "I heard someone left you an anonymous package," he said. "Serena, think about what is happening. Someone is trying to sabotage us right before our biggest night of the year. Whatever is on that drive is probably fake. Do not give them the satisfaction." Serena slipped the USB drive into her drawer, locking away the truth. That evening, Marcus returned home to find his daughter, Nora, waiting on the steps with a fresh drawing. She held it up as he climbed out of his truck. It showed 2 stick figures standing on a dock under a bright yellow sun, a tall father and his little girl. "That is us," she said. Marcus knelt, studying her art with the deep respect he gave everything she created. "The best one yet," he smiled. Nora threw her arms tightly around his neck. They quietly cooked dinner together that night. Marcus showed her how to dice an onion, and she giggled so hard when a tomato rolled off the counter that he could not help but laugh along. "Are you sad, Daddy?" she softly asked later while they ate. Marcus smiled and shook his head. "Never sad when I have you." Once Nora fell asleep, Marcus sat alone in the dark, clutching his worn brass compass. Out front, the river was completely still. He felt the weight of the compass, tracing the scratched glass from the day Catherine dropped it outside the hospital. "I am trying," Kathy whispered. "I am trying." Going inside, the quiet hero opened his laptop to draft an email to the FBI. He attached the hidden bank files, the shell company records, and a clear breakdown of the massive fraud. He clicked send at 11:47 p.m. 2 days before her big charity gala, Serena finally plugged in the drive. She loaded it, expecting nothing but useless noise. The typical made-up lies that angry former employees usually cook up. Instead, she stared at a 46-page audit far more detailed than anything her own experts had ever produced. Every single dollar was mapped. Every fake shell company was named, documented, and tied directly back to Grant. The stolen money wound through 7 entities across 3 different countries. The grand total stolen was $12.4 million. Every entry was dated, matched to their official ledger, and backed by solid proof. The billionaire stared at her screen in stunned silence. She picked up her phone and summoned Grant to her office immediately. She demanded answers about 3 major projects that had absolutely no construction work. Grant stayed completely smooth. He blamed a bankrupt local contractor, calling it an unfortunate but minor setback, and promised to have a full audit ready right after the gala. "Right now, we must focus entirely on Saturday night." "Everything else could wait," he insisted. Serena quietly let him go. Then she got into her car and drove 40 minutes south to inspect one of those 3 sites. She arrived at a plot near Hinesville, Georgia, where a new children's shelter was supposed to stand. She pulled off the highway and parked on a quiet dirt road beside a vacant field. No concrete foundation, no wooden framing, no machinery, no sign that anyone had ever dug a single hole. Only dry red clay and wild scrubgrass stretching to the trees. The powerful billionaire stood alone in the empty wasteland, completely powerless. Her hands were shaking. Humiliated and furious, she drove straight back to Savannah. She accessed the foundation's secure records. and began tracing the Compass Fund's financial history. For 2 hours, she tracked the money backward through legal trusts and secret accounts, following routing numbers that led to a single holding company based in New York. Then she found the shocking detail that stopped her cold. Every single donation from the Compass Fund had been sent on the exact same date, March 14th. She searched public registries and found a death notice filed in Chatham County, Georgia. Catherine Cole, age 33, pediatrician, survived by her husband Marcus Cole and their daughter Nora. Date of death, March 14th. Serena pushed back from her desk so hard her office chair slammed into the wall. Her hands gripped the wooden desk, trembling. The quiet dock worker she had pitied, the very man she let her husband humiliate at her own event without even lifting a finger. That supposedly broken man had funded 60% of her life's work for 5 years. Every single shelter kept open, every struggling child who had a warm bed, every vulnerable woman who found safety inside her walls, he had paid for it all. And he had never once asked for his identity to be revealed. She drove to the waterfront, but Marcus was gone. The dock was empty. The cold wooden bench where she had once patronizingly asked to join him was damp, and nobody was sitting there. His working tools were packed away. His truck was gone. Staring at the vacant seat, she remembered his quiet face when she had asked that arrogant question. She had asked to sit, and he simply nodded without looking up. Only now did she realize he knew exactly who she was. He had always known. Across town, Grant's phone rang. It was a nervous partner from the Meridian Group. The man's voice trembled. Someone had hired a top forensic audit team from Atlanta. They are pulling our past filings. Someone is spending a fortune to tear us down. Grant ended the call and sat in absolute silence for 10 seconds. Then he flipped open his laptop and started deleting files. The Grand Hotel ballroom on the riverfront was decorated beautifully for the harbor gala. Sparkling chandeliers hung above tables covered in white linen, magnolia, and sweet jasmine. 300 elite guests filled the room, a mix of wealthy donors, politicians, and media. A live string quartet welcomed guests near the entrance. Waiters circulated carrying fresh champagne flutes. It was the kind of event that made people feel powerful just by showing up. Grant Mercer stood at the podium in a tailored navy suit delivering his speech. His voice carried the fake warmth of a man playing the role of a saint. He boasted about their noble mission, claiming credit for saving vulnerable children, and about the shelters that proved what wealthy generosity could construct. Then he paused dramatically, leaned toward the microphone, and made his move. I am thrilled to announce that Ashford Harbor has secured an elite new partner. Meridian Partners will be replacing our former anonymous donor, whose recent odd behavior has raised deep concerns about reliability. Tonight we begin a stronger, far more transparent chapter. Serena sat in the second row, expressionless, completely refusing to applaud. Midway through his next sentence, the heavy doors opened and Marcus Cole walked in. He wore a plain black suit, no tie, no luxury, and zero ornamentation. He had combed his hair, his shoes were clean. He looked like a man wearing his only suit, stepping bravely into a room where I thought he didn't belong. Yet he walked with the absolute certainty of the man who truly belonged. He had commanded rooms far more powerful than this, never needing anyone to know it. 300 heads turned as whispers rippled across the tables. Several guests instantly recognized him as the quiet man from the docks. The same man Grant had dismissed at our reception. A donor near the front leaned to his wife and whispered, "Isn't that the mechanic?" Grant froze. His smile tightened before he hissed, "Security? Who authorized this?" Grant stared at Marcus with the pure contempt only a terrified man can muster. "This is a private gala. You can't just—" "I invited him." My voice cut through the room like a blade. I stood up, smoothed down my gown, and walked steadily toward the stage. Grant blinked in disbelief. "Serena, this man is a boat mechanic from the marina." "He has no—" I stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and spoke clearly to everyone in the room. "The man you just dismissed as a boat mechanic has anonymously donated $22 million to this foundation over the past 5 years. He is the Compass Fund, and he never once asked for his name to be known." The silence that followed was heavy, not the silence of politeness or simple confusion. The silence of 300 people instantly rewriting everything they believed about him. Every single eye in the room locked directly onto Marcus. He stood by the back wall, hands in his pockets, his calm expression unchanged. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just stood there, exactly as he had on the dock when Grant ordered him away. Grant recovered first, barely. This is completely absurd. There is no proof of this. I quietly tapped a key on the laptop linked to the screen. The first slide flickered to life. It was a detailed forensic audit summary prepared by an independent firm in Atlanta. It listed 7 shell companies registered directly to Grant Mercer or entities he controlled. It showed $12.4 million in stolen funds traced through offshore accounts. Every transaction carried a digital signature and a clear timestamp, along with a corresponding entry matching our internal ledger. Grant drained of all color, taking a slow step backward, then another. His panicked eyes darted toward the exit at the far side of the room. 2 men in dark suits were already waiting there, badges glinting on their belts. They had been positioned there long before the first guest arrived. Grant spun back to the crowd, his composure fracturing as he shouted, "You don't know anything. This foundation would have gone bankrupt years ago if it weren't for my work. I kept the lights on, I made the deals, Marcus walked forward, never rushing. He walked through the parting crowd with the ease of a man who had already made his final choice and was simply arriving at the spot to see it through. He stopped 10 feet from the podium and finally spoke for the first time. His voice was low and steady, filling the room. "Every dollar I sent has a log. Every project you claimed to build, I visited in person. 7 addresses, 7 completely empty lots, not a single brick." He opened a laptop on the nearest table, projecting fresh proof onto the screen. GPS-tagged photographs of 7 locations, each matching a project Grant claimed was under construction. Empty fields, abandoned warehouses, overgrown lots, not a single sign of foundation work. The metadata on every photo proved the date, the coordinates, and the device used. They were unalterable. Grant pointed at Marcus, his hand shaking as he snapped, "Who are you?" "You're nobody, just some random nobody. I'm Catherine Cole's husband." Marcus did not raise his voice. She was a pediatrician. She spent her career taking care of other people's children. Her one wish was that every orphan had a home that wouldn't fall apart around them. You took that wish and turned it into a bank account. Nobody in the room dared to breathe. I saw a woman in the 3rd row press a napkin to her eyes. A city councilman set down his champagne glass and did not touch it again. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. 300 people sat in a silence so heavy we could hear the river outside the windows. Grant's mouth opened and closed. He scanned the crowd for a sympathetic face and found absolutely none. The donors who laughed at his jokes 20 minutes ago now refused to meet his gaze. The politicians who had eagerly shaken his hand stared down at their plates. 2 FBI agents stepped forward. One of them called Grant by his full legal name, arresting him on federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. Grant tried to wrench himself free. Just a single desperate jerk of his arm, but the agents held him fast. They forced his hands behind his back. The metal handcuffs clicked. In that silent ballroom, the sound carried all the way to the back. They paraded him past the tables, the champagne, and the silent faces of everyone he had betrayed, right out the door. The doors clicked shut behind him with a heavy thud that felt like a final period at the end of a sentence as they marched him away. I turned back to my laptop. I opened a second file Marcus hadn't shown me, compiled by auditors from federal financial records. The Compass Fund hadn't just funded Ashford Harbor. It had backed 13 other organizations nationwide, including schools for children with disabilities in Tennessee. There were women's shelters in Ohio, health clinics in Alabama, and a literacy program in West Virginia. The total amount, donated to 14 organizations over 5 years, was $87 million. And not a single recipient ever knew his name. I stared at that massive number on the screen, feeling the sheer weight of it hit my chest. $87 million, 5 years, 14 charities, and the man behind it all sat on a dock in dusty work boots. He let everyone treat him like a broken laborer, never once correcting them. I turned to find Marcus, but he had already walked off the stage. He stood entirely alone in the far corner of the ballroom, his back against the wall. He watched us the way he watched the river from his dock, quietly from a distance, as if none of this belonged to him. The morning after the gala, our Savannah waterfront was completely quiet. The party lights and decorations were still hanging, but the tables and chairs were all gone. Below us, the river flowed slowly under a pale sky, and the morning air smelled of salt and wet wood. A lone heron stood still by the channel, watching the current with the calm patience of having nowhere else to be. I found Marcus back at his dock by 6. He was kneeling beside a motor, replacing some old spark plugs. He had changed back into his work clothes, his hands already dirty. The glamorous events of last night felt like they happened to someone else. He had not checked his phone. He had not read the news. He made Nora breakfast, drove her to school, and headed to the marina like any other morning. He heard footsteps on the wooden planks before he saw her. Serena walked toward him, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. No heels, no jewelry, just a plain jacket over a cotton shirt, no entourage, no luxury car waiting nearby. She stopped a few feet from where he worked, silently standing there with the cups in her hands. The river flowed quietly behind them. Neither of them seemed to notice. After a long moment, she spoke. "Why did you never say anything?" Marcus did not look up. He tightened a plug with his wrench, wiped his hands on a rag, and answered without turning around. "Because it was never about the giver. It was only ever about who received it." Serena sat beside him. The same spot on the wooden dock, the exact bench where she had asked to sit weeks ago. This time she did not ask, she just sat down. They stayed like that for a long time, watching the water, needing no words to be said. 1 week later, construction finally began on the new children's shelter. Funded by recovered assets and the wave of donations that poured in after the gala. Serena managed the site herself, arriving every morning before the work crew. Marcus showed up on the 3rd day. He did not come as a donor or a name on a plaque, but simply as a volunteer. He spent the whole afternoon building bookshelves in the reading room, measuring, cutting, and fitting every piece with the quiet precision he brought to all his work. Late in the afternoon, Nora arrived from school, dropped off at the site by a kind neighbor. She walked into the reading room carrying a new box of crayons and sat in the corner without being asked. She opened the box, pulled out a blue crayon, and started to draw. A wooden dock, a small boat, and 2 people sitting side by side watching the water. She looked up and saw Serena standing in the doorway, and Nora smiled. "Do you want to draw with me?" Serena glanced over at Marcus. He gave a tiny nod so slight it was barely visible. Serena sat down next to Nora. The 3 of them sat in a room that still smelled of fresh-cut lumber. Each of them carried their own silence, yet they shared the exact same roof. No grand declarations, no promises, just presence. The simple, beautiful reality of being in the same place at the same time and truly meaning it. For the first time in 5 years, Marcus Cole was not sitting alone. Neither of them actually was.